Purnamada Purnamidam. You already saw this illustration at the end of the last part, and I like to again show it because this is really now what we are going to try to do. We are going to try to understand what are the ways in which we can develop healthy habits in our lives. We can there also then try to find that main energetic practice that we are going to choose and develop and train so that we become very good at it, which always allows us to change our feeling and bring back the feeling of the self. And then there are also some more occasional practices, I would say, which at particular times in life may help us to deal with particular problems of that time. And all of that, then all these energetic practices ultimately allowing us to apply the so-called seed-based practices that directly relate to Satchit and Ananda, basically meaning to detach from everything, to stop mind, and to go into that eternal bliss of the now. These are the seed-based practices, and please do not be confused between those essential practices and the energetic practices. They both work together. It is no use, let's say, to start working with your breath or to engage in healthy cooking if not at the same time you try to somewhat distance yourself from everything and detach, not identify with any of these problems that come in life. So it is no use to do only one of them. As I said before, if just going to the now, stop your mind, detach works, then that is enough. If it does not work, you also try to work with the energy, so that then finally these seed-based practices can work. But of course, we should not forget them. And in that way, they are totally complementary. In a way, I would say this is also then a matter of detached attachment. Now, we have talked about this quite a lot already in other classes, where, okay, if you work with your breath, you are totally attached to that, meaning you are totally involved with it. You're really trying to do a good job. You're not like absent-minded. No, you are really trying to do it. But at the same time, you remain detached from any result. If anyhow, after your breathing, you still feel bad, okay, so what? You do not attach to that. So it's a little tricky, of course, if you are trying to change something, if you are trying to produce a certain feeling or whatever, then naturally, okay, you are working towards a certain objective, so the attachment to that objective is natural. But so, okay, we have to be conscious about that, and whenever we see it happen, we stop it, and we do not expect anything. We just try to behave naturally. A lot of these things actually mostly relate to our way of life, so that we live in tune with nature, that we live in tune with the energy, and in that way make it a lot easier. And so in that way, what we are talking about is not only concerning the practice that we do when we step out of life. It is also very much the practice of life itself, which we are looking at, how to live and how to make your life into a yoga, into a practice. And then, okay, the practice that you do, let's say, outside of life, when you try to meditate, when you try to do some particular exercise, it just, supports that more essential work, I would say, of living in a yogic way. And so, okay, also there should not be any opposition between it, but there is a big difference in how serious we are when we do these things, because we always have to remember that there really is no problem. So if we make our life very serious, then that is actually following an untruth. Because the only reason we would do that is because we think there is a big problem. In our practice, when we do breathing, when we do meditation and all that, yes, sure, there's some seriousness, let's say some concentration is really needed. Otherwise, how can it work? But all this only to allow us to be less serious in life, to be less attached in life. So let's say, okay, we try to cook a very balanced meal. Okay, we give it our best, but please do not get too serious about it. I do not really believe in a very extreme yogic lifestyle. It should always remain somewhat natural and relaxed. Extreme practices sometimes, yes, for sure. If you're doing 2 hours of mantra meditation, that I would say is quite an extreme practice, if you are there with your full concentration. But that seriousness we should not then also keep with us in life and try to keep everything perfectly under control. What we are seeking in life is a kind of flexibility, a kind of dynamic balance, not something rigid. That is just actually, again, our ego and our tendency to control everything which is at play. When we try to do that, the whole idea is actually to become less serious. But okay, sometimes then some seriousness is needed, even in life. Even if we want to change something in our life, in our habits, this may not always be easy. Or let's say if we deal with certain addictions or something, we may have to be a little bit strict. But that definitely should not be like how we live. That should not be our attitude in life. We should be relaxed about it, and not be in a hurry or anything. When then we choose certain habits, when then we choose certain exercises, practices, there, okay, we have to a little bit try out things and see what works for us. I hope this at least is already clear from many other talks. The goal may be the same for everyone, but the path to reach that goal definitely is very individual, because that which we want to reach is already there. The self is already there. There's no path leading you there. The only thing for which we need a path is to lose things, to get rid of things. And that is individual, of course, because some people have this in their luggage and some other people have something else in their luggage. So then how to get rid of that luggage is different. So in that way, we need to keep an open mind. Any kind of practice may have something for us that is really valuable for us, that really helps us to move forward. And whatever people are saying about it is actually not very relevant. The only thing that really is relevant is what you experience with it. If you feel it is helpful for you, then that is okay, logical then to do. Again, natural way of approaching this, and not, I would say, get caught in any kind of dogmatic thinking about the path. Any dogmatic idea about the path is by definition wrong, precisely because the path is individual. So nobody can say this is the only way. Never fall into that kind of trap, because then you might be stuck in some kind of practice for a very long time, which is not really working for you. Only because maybe somebody said it is the way. So we should try to avoid that, and we have to try out things and then make up our mind. And then once we find something that really works for us, yes, there we totally devote our time for it. We totally maybe drop everything else just to make time for that one practice which we feel is very helpful, and we want to master it. And then it will really fulfill its promise, to Too many people also are doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and jumping around all the time, and nothing then seems to work. No, of course not. We need to really become good at it, learn it. Now, please don't take this illustration very seriously, because it was actually just some way to pass the time on a Sunday morning when I made that. Okay, the more essential image, without all these extra powers in the petals, that is different. That image is also in the book, because it is a very essential image to show how from Sat, Chit and Ananda, how from the void, the pure consciousness, the silence, and from the bliss, the whole universe manifests, and in that way also gives us the powers to return to that self. And so when then I thought, well, why not have a look how different paths or different practices or different powers would fit into that mandala of lotus petals. Then of course we have to immediately see there are thousands of practices, but only a limited number of lotus petals is here. So whatever I have done here is synthesizing somewhat, to some degree, how different practices fit together. But still, okay, we can see. For example, when we start with Chit, the power of silence, which is there, which is this seed-based practice of keeping the mind silent, that from there, in the universe, the sound manifests, and that this sound, in that way, is then also a primary power to come back to the self. And the most essential expression of that is in Om, and I would say also in many other seed sounds. We'll go a little more deep into that, which then lead to the power of mantra, of course, because mantras are constructed using these seed sounds. But sound is not just spoken sound or chanted sound, of course. There's also drums and many musical instruments. So there we have beat to work with. We have anyhow also tone to work with. So then the whole play of music also is a huge power, not to be underestimated. I would say if you feel that there is no song anymore that can make you happy, then you are really in trouble. If there is no song that you can play on YouTube or whatever that will really change your mood, then you are really in trouble. Because music has that power. Music has tremendous power. And I also advise absolutely to use that. And it's a great luxury, I would say, of modern times, that we have so much music at our disposal. In the old days, one had maybe to wait till some musician, a traveling musician as they used to exist at the time, was passing through the village, and then maybe one evening we could also enjoy the power of music from a real, good musician. So anyhow, there are many things to do, and of course also you don't have to be a professional musician to make music, and work with that. And then of course these sounds, they also have meaning, because they are related, of course, to consciousness. And so then the power of sound definitely also is the power of thought, to think truth. This is a very important thing, And so also there in our thought patterns we can work and develop the power, I would say, of positive thought and of true thought, and use that in our practice. So, and then if we go to Sat, the primary power of presence, of beingness, of the void, the existence without form, then from there space comes out, and with space also the other elements, air, fire, water, earth. And so, shapes, forms are created. And that is, of course, a very essential thing, creating the problem of individuality, you can say. The problem of attachment also is there. So, and there we have different ways to work with it. And the main way is the power of love. And this love, we'll talk a little bit about it more, but this love is mostly meant here as the power of caring and sharing, which is like, you could say, the motherly love, because this space is like the mother matter who is taking care for all of us, for all of her children. And so in that way also there is a great power in that, to care for ourselves and for others and share what we can share is a very essential part. We'll talk more about it. And so related, of course, to the elements are the senses, because it is with the senses that we are actually knowing the elements, that we are experiencing the elements. So there, of course, working with the senses is also a very important aspect of yoga, both in trying to satisfy and calm the senses, as in being then able to withdraw from the senses and go inside, which then relates very much to the power of desire, because the desires are also very much coming out of our body, coming out of the elements, and so in that way it can bring us up or bring us down, depending on where we want to go. Up and down is not meaning good and bad, It just depends where we want to go. But it definitely has an impact on our spiritual progress. And by chance, I would say, this petal of the power of desire is there very much on the side of chit, on the side of thought, because of course desires are thoughts. They may start on a more feeling level, but it is with thought that we make the desire concrete, and then we say we want this. And so there is, of course, then also a very important relationship. And then on the other side, with the power of space, we have then, of course, the actual work with the body, which is the science of Ayurveda, and which is then also, of course, the science of asana, of all kinds of exercises and yoga postures and different things that we can do with the body, so that it is comfortable, and it makes it more easy to detach from it and go to our void beingness. So, and then last but not least, Ananda, the power of now, the bliss of the self. That relates mainly to the life force, the prana, which, as I said, is always changing. So there in yoga, of course, we have the famous pranayama, the different breathing exercises, which we can very rapidly and very directly change our feeling, change our energy, and control our mind, and in that way remove any unpleasantness in our emotions. But breath is definitely not the only way in which we work with the life force. And there again is the link to Ayurveda, which is why I've put the power of Ayurveda there in the petal next to Ananda, because Ayurveda is not only looking at the elements through the system of the doshas, but is also very much looking at the life force through different systems, best known, of course, the gunas, but also, for example, prana, tejas, ojas, which are also related to breath, but are also related very much to our food and how we live and different things. Then related also, of course, to the prana is the pranic body, where we feel our emotions. So there I have also added the power of rasa, meaning the power of understanding your emotions and being able to change your emotions through this understanding, which is the knowledge that I have been putting in the book on the yoga of the 9 emotions. And then again, also related to prana ultimately is the Kundalini yoga, the work with Kundalini, whether more consciously or less consciously. But anyhow, that is of course a main power in yoga, to elevate our consciousness, to bring it to a higher level, so that we get a different point of view and a different understanding. And we can, very much there transform ourselves in a fundamental way. So, okay, all of that is there. And as I said, don't take it too seriously, but it does give an understanding, which is, I think, very important. And this understanding is what I was saying before, that all these practices, all these powers have the same source, belong together, are complementary to each other, and nobody should be telling you this is the way, that is the only way. There are many ways, and it is up to you to find your way. And your way is the right way for you. That is how we have to see it. Purnamada Purnamidam. Here we see that these energetic practices are still part of a larger practice, which then also includes the 5 main yogic paths, which are not energetic practices, but which are practices for the ego. And so they are in that way very different. Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, and ultimately also Tantra Yoga are the ways in which to deal with our most essential nature, which is that, we can think, we can feel, and we can act. And we can also maybe do none of that. And we can also try to do all of it at once. These are the things that we can do. They are very much part of who we are as human beings. And so for each of these things, a yoga has been devised so that it can be helpful to reduce the ego or transform the ego, or whichever way you want to work with your ego. And so in Bhakti Yoga, okay, we bring the ego towards the feeling of love, rather than, let's say, the feeling of anger or fear. And this love for the divine is a great way for the ego to a little bit forget about itself, be more involved with everything, seeing the divine in everything. That is what Bhakti is about. And of course, to do that, many energetic practices are used, like, for example, chanting is very often used in Bhakti Yoga, but there is a difference. Chanting can be used in any kind of yoga. Chanting can be used even in Jnana Yoga. But okay, it maybe belongs a little bit more to Bhakti Yoga, but still it is an energetic practice which is only there to help you feel that love, and truly fall in love with the divine. And the nature of a person who has fallen in love is very much that he forgets about himself, and only thinks about the object of that love. So in that way, Bhakti is there. Jnana is there then for our thinking, to think truth, bring order a little bit to our thoughts, and ultimately go beyond thinking, the finding of this I, which is there behind every thought, and in that way finding the essence and coming to silence, and in that way reason the ego away. That is the path of Jnana Yoga. And then we have Karma Yoga, which is very useful whenever we act, to make sure that our action is not so much selfish, that it serves everybody, that it is something then, perceived as good, and that as egos we do not have too much expectation whenever we are doing something. And so in that way we also have no disappointment to deal with our actions. So in that way, Karma Yoga is also a very important part. And then I said, if we want to stop thinking and feeling and doing anything, then we have the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga to bring us to silence, to bring us to stillness, to stop everything, and come finally in samadhi, in deep meditation, to that point where everything else ceases to exist and only the self is there. And In that way also the ego, of course, has at least temporarily left the story, and we can really identify with our divine nature. And then, Tantra is a little bit a more magical approach, I would say, where all these things are used simultaneously. In that way, help also to remove the more, I would say, subconscious blockages that are there in the ego, change things which are through these other parts maybe a little more difficult to change. Again, here I am not the kind of person who will say you have to do this, or you have to believe in that, or you have to follow that. They are all again complementary, because we are all human beings who think, who feel, who act, and who might do none of that or all of that together. So in this way, our mix, let's say, of the different yoga paths is personal, but we should never forget one of them. Actually, we need all five of these, and then with the help of the energetic practices that are there in the middle of the image, we can also truly make it possible to do that, so that our feeling follows our objective. Because, okay, we can think very positively that everything is okay and everything is divine and so on, but if we don't feel it, it's difficult. Then we need the energetic practices. Purnamada Purnamada